what we do in life. It goes in eternity.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
These guys are hammers, and to hammers everything looks like nails.
I heard that.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out, and we'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. What good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes the credit? So she leaves crumbs. Now the hard part is seeing the crumbs for the clues they are. Sometimes the thing you thought was the most brutal aspect turns out to be the chink in its armor, and she loves disguising her weaknesses as strengths.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared complete loss.
Be prepared for anything. Our war has just begun.
We are the hammers, and we are the nails. The world stands upon the precipice of total insanity, and we need you, and we hope you need us, bringing information, news, and as much truth as we can eke out before Mother Nature turns us to crumbs. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, working to become millions of voices singing in unison to bring the sanity back home.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And, well, I usually tell y'all that we're listening to listener-supported radio where information never sleeps for Revolution Radio, but I kind of got ahead of myself that time and forgot to do it. But I think you guys all know that Talk Now Radio and Revolution Radio are both listener-supported. And if you want to stay on the air and censor-free, your contributions do help. So keep that one in mind. Joining me today is going to be Mike Bara. We're going to be talking about his newest book, Ancient Aliens on Mars 2. And Mike, you know what? Every time I go to type that in the chat room, I always keep typing on the moon and erasing part of it and putting it back the right way.
Well, that happens. I mean, we've got Ancient Aliens on the moon, Ancient Aliens on Mars, and now Ancient Aliens on Mars 2. So I kind of go by their acronyms, you know, AAOTM, AAOM, and AAOM2.
Oh my goodness, that's even more confusing.
Yeah, well, it could be, I guess. I don't know. I'm used to acronyms. I spent a lot of time in the aerospace industry, so everything in aerospace is acronyms.
So, what can you tell us more about your book 2 than there was about book 1? Have we got some new evidence in there and some other stuff like that?
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to do was that, I didn't really feel completely finished with the face on Mars, which was, it turned out in the first book was going to be a little bit about Cydonia and a lot about other things besides the face and the DNM and all that stuff. And it actually turned out that just getting that information down on the page took a lot more space than I expected, and really it was a point in the first book, in Ancient Aliens on Mars, where I felt like, wow, I've pretty much got to just stop talking about Cydonia and the face, or this book is going to be about nothing except Cydonia and the face, which was not really my plan. So I ended up having to put some information aside and put it aside for something else, and that's when the second book sort of began to formulate. So interestingly, how it starts out is I do finish off with a lot of information about the face on Mars that some of it hasn't been previously published before, and I go through a lot of the things that happened with the famous thermal infrared imagery of Cydonia, which was a big kind of, cloak and dagger kind of thing that took place in 2002 and 2003 with the folks at Arizona State University and Dr. Philip Christensen. So I started out with that, and one of the things that I started doing in the process was that, in that investigation, one of the things that we did, which really brought out this rich, incredible detail of what looks like a city underneath the ice at Cydonia in the thermal infrared images, was we took the visible light images and layered them on top of the thermal infrared. And when we did that, that's when all of these structures just suddenly, sort of came out of the data, fell out of the data, stuff that was obviously buildings and streets and these transportation tube tunnel systems and things like that. So
you can even make out what they are.
Yeah, you can really. It's funny because when we just looked at the thermal infrared data, it wasn't really clear. When you look at the visual data, it wasn't really clear. When you layered them together, suddenly you joined one signal with the other, and you got more information. And one of the things that was really curious to me that I was really interested in was, what if I started taking other images of Cydonia, including the face, and I started layering even more visual images on top of this? What would I get? And so consequently, I took the Mars Express images, which were taken by a camera called the High Resolution Stereo Camera, and they're the most directly overhead views of the face that we've had since Viking days back in 1976. And when I actually took the previous data, and then I added the Mars Express data to that and lined them up and aligned everything perfectly, what we got was even more stuff that came out. I mean, there's this, on the left side of the face, or the right side from the viewer's perspective of the picture, there are structural, architectural kinds of features that just jump out at you. The eye socket in the right side of the face came out extremely prominently, and these features that had kind of disappeared in some of the Mars Global Surveyor data suddenly came back, and I'm talking about nostrils in the nose and teeth in the mouth. And it's weird that this happened, but what I kind of decided from that and realized is that, every instrument that we send to Mars, every camera has different characteristics of it. Hardware, it has different software, it processes the information differently. And what I realized is that we're seeing different levels of detail with the different cameras, and they're all taking pictures of the same thing, but they're not seeing exactly the same thing. But only when you combine them all together, as I ultimately did, do you get the real picture. And what came through was that, clear, distinct signs based on Mars is artificial. And the interesting thing, again, for me, was that these teeth features had returned. And it made me very suspicious about the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the Mars Global Surveyor images of the face on Mars, because there's no hint or indication of anything that might represent teeth in the mouth. Yet in these other data sets, when you put them together, they seem to appear, just as they did in the original Viking data. And so what that implies to me is that somebody may have been fooling around a little bit with the Global Surveyor images and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter images, because there's just no hint of that stuff at all. So, to me, that was that. To be able to actually glean some new data, some new information about the face on Mars after, we're coming up on 50 years now since the first Viking pictures were taken in 76, 86, 96.
You keep kind of fading off.
40 years. Yeah, coming up in on 40 years now since the first original Viking data was taken. To be able to have contributed something new to the analysis was a real pleasure and a joy for me, and something I really was pleased with.
Okay, real quick, Mike, have you been moving your face away from the microphone a little bit there, here and there?
No, but I'll try to be more direct from here on.
Yeah, okay, but because you drifted off a couple of times, I don't know if you knew it or not. Now, that's a lot of interesting information about the face that we didn't have before. I mean, we had some, but it would have been placed in doubt by other photographs later on, as you already know. Have you ever read any of Zecharia Sitchin's works about Mars?
Yeah, I've read a couple of his books. I read The Lost Book of Enki, I think it was called. I think I read that one. It dealt with the face on Mars, and I've read Sitchin's books for sure.
Okay, so you're familiar with what he said about the Anunnaki who got exiled to Mars, and his assistant, I think it was saying he was going to build a monument to this guy on Mars. So could this space be that monument, you think?
Well, that's Sitchin's theory. I know, one of the things that Zecharia Sitchin that most people just don't realize is that he actually claimed privately to have been in communication with the aliens, with the Anunnaki, and that a lot of his information actually came from that communication with them. So that I think is really interesting, that they're kind of laying claim to the face on Mars. It certainly is a monument. It's an example of monumental architecture. I think I agree with that 100%. But as to his interpretation that it's meant to be the Anunnaki god Enki, who knows? I mean, maybe we'll go there someday and there'll be a little plaque somewhere on the face on Mars that will say, this monument was dedicated 12,000 years ago to Enki or something. But I don't think we really know. I don't think we'll ever know until we go there and land and actually examine the area. So
then we may not know if they hide it from us.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where it's like, okay, Zach can make that claim, but to me, he didn't really have any evidence to support it, except that obviously that Mars and the Moon would be waypoints, way stations on the way to Earth. So it makes sense that if you believe in the Anunnaki scenario, which I do to a great extent, it makes sense that they would have bases on Mars and have bases on it.
Yeah, but would they go to all that trouble to build that big of a monument? Because you would think if it was just a way station, they wouldn't have all that access to labor.
Well, it depends. It depends on what the intent of it is. I mean, a monument, the purpose of a monument is to leave something behind. And when you're leaving something behind that you'll be remembered by, that's a project that many kings and pharaohs and other leaders over the years have wanted to do. So to me, it's not inconsistent with that desire to sort of leave your mark someplace and maybe remind your creation thousands of years later, that you're the creator. That could be the purpose of it. And if in fact that's true, I don't actually believe what the Anunnaki told.
Pretty much.
To me, it's like if I landed on a planet and I found humanoid females and they were, as the Bible says, fair, and I started messing around with them, I'd tell them I was a god too, especially if I had control over rockets and lasers and guns and things like that, and all they had was knives and swords and rocks. I'd say, yes, I'm a god, Of course you would. Everybody would do that. So I'm not sure that the Anunnaki actually told the Sumerians the truth or not, but it probably sounds pretty good.
Well, if you stop and think about it, Joe, the person who wrote the Bible also included the story of Abraham, who didn't give birth to a child until she was 90. She was in her 60s or 70s when they went to Egypt, and he was calling his wife fair, that they would want to have, relations with her, in other words. So you got to question the Bible writer's idea of fair, in other words.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true, but, it's also possible that in a different environment, that physics were different back then, and that people lived longer and they were much healthier. And there's also, I think the creationists have an argument about what they call the water canopy idea, where the whole biblical flood of 40 days and 40 nights could have come from the fact that there was a very, very thick water-filled atmosphere canopy above the earth back in the day, and that some catastrophe sort of brought that all down to earth, and that was the cause of the flood, like a meteor hit it or something like that. But that it would have given human beings a lot better protection from the harmful cosmic rays of the sun and just the galaxy in general, and that people may in fact have lived very much longer. They may have lived 10 times longer than they did. So, a 90-year-old woman back in those days may have been, a hot 22-year-old today. So it's not implausible. It's not impossible, and to look at the scenario like that. So I think if you live longer, and remember, a lot of the biblical lifetimes are 700, 800, 900 years. If we lived longer because the environment was more protective of ourselves, there's no reason to think we wouldn't have aged a bit slower and so forth. So,
and all the women out in radio land says, I want to go back in time to the time when we lived.
Yeah. I don't know if I could take girls being super attractive into their 90s. That would be a little crazy. Sort of redefine the term cougar, wouldn't it?
Well, I think it'd be a little crazy to one of us living in this time with this reality into a different reality back in ancient times, but maybe to the people of that time it wouldn't be so weird.
Yeah, if people naturally lived 800 or 900 or 1,000 years, then it wouldn't be all that strange. So I don't know. We just don't know. It's one of those things where we have to look at the fossil record, and I leave that to people like Michael Tellinger to dig up all the giant skeletons and stuff.
Oh, God knows he does a good job of it.
Yeah. It's funny, I just got back from Contact in the Desert a couple of weeks ago, which was a great conference out there in Joshua Tree, and I saw his name there and really, big print, and I'd never heard of the gentleman before, and I didn't know what he did, and after listening to his presentation, I came away very impressed with his work. So I think it's funny, there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work out there that not everybody knows about, and I think it's a really good thing.
Oh, I happen to know that a whole lot. I get people contacting me on a regular basis wanting to be on my show that basically I've never heard of, and you'd think I would be in it. I'd talk to so many people. But yet, when I read their material, it's some very good material. So, the thing is, it just hadn't been out in the market that long yet, in other words.
Yeah, it takes time to build up your brand, I guess, and I've certainly gone through that experience. I've been really lucky to have the opportunity to do Ancient Aliens, a TV show, and the whole Uncovering Aliens, my reality show, and a bunch of other shows that I've been able to do. And it's been very fortunate for me and helped me get out there and get my work better known. So,
are you still doing that show you were doing recently? I'm trying to think of the name of it.
It's Uncovering Aliens. That's the reality show. Yeah.
Right.
It's actually, the network is contemplating whether they're going to do more episodes or not, and they're kind of weighing the expense versus the ratings. And it's one of those things where if your listeners did like the show and wanted to see more of it, that you can tweet to the Science Channel or tweet to Animal Planet, or even on my blog on mikebara.blogspot.com. There's some links to emails of some of the top executives, and let them know whether you enjoyed the show or not. And if you did, maybe they'll come around and put more episodes out. So right now we don't know what's going to happen with it, but these things happen, and I think it's an important show to have on, because there isn't any other show that I'm aware of right now that's investigating current sightings, current UFO cases. There just really isn't anything that does it. Everything that's on TV is historical documentary type stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned your website just then, because in all honesty, I had forgotten all about it.
I've got a blog. It's mikebara.blogspot.com. It's just one R, B-A-R-A. Or you can just type in Mike Bara on Google, and that should be the first site that comes up. So by all means, swing by, take a look at the website. You can also connect with me on Facebook. I have a fan page, an author page, because I'm full up with my full 5,000 friends limit on Facebook. And Twitter, I'm at Mike Bara 33. So, look me up on any of those social media networks. And of course, I've got a YouTube channel and all that stuff. And you can connect to all of it through the blog, mikebara.blogspot.com.
I just put your link in the chat room for everybody, the Blogspot one.
Okay.
Also, everybody listening, ain't here live. When you hear it later, if you go back to my page, because you might be listening at YouTube or Dead Emotion or whatever, if you go back to my page at talknowradio.net and look in my archives, the show will be there. This show will be there, and I have his link on that as well. That way, everybody can have more than one place to find it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't want everybody to not know as much about you as possible. It's a little bit off the subject, but why don't you let them know about your book, The Choice, and Ancient Aliens on the Moon, real quick?
Okay, well, I've actually written 5 books now. I co-wrote Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA with Richard C. Hoagland. That was the first book I did back in 2007. In 2010, I wrote a book called The Choice, which was really about the balance between physics and metaphysics. And what I really wanted to show people was that all of this crazy new age metaphysical stuff that they all, they believe in, is actually, there's a solid physical basis for it. There's a solid experimental basis for all this stuff, especially for the ether, the energy field that connects everything together, all living things together. There's a solid experimental basis for that. And there's just a bunch of experiments in physics and science that are ignored by the physicists and the scientists. And what I wanted to do was bring those out and show people that, you're not crazy for believing these things. There's actually a background to this. And for instance, eclipses can actually influence your thinking. They can actually influence people's moods. I mean, for instance, all you have to do is ask any bartender or waitress, in a bar, if things get crazy during a full moon, and she'll tell you that people's behavior dramatically changes. And, again, there's nothing in science that can account for that. But just go around and ask anybody. And, I've heard so many times I can't tell you, there'll be a fight or something, and some waitress will go, oh, it must be a full moon, because people act differently. So it was basically a book talking about and describing the physical experiments that show and support the idea that the alignment of the planets and the alignment of the solar system with the galactic center actually does affect us in terms of our consciousness and our physical reality. And that was basically to give that New Age community reinforcement for the belief system that they already have. And it was a bunch of information that had never really been published before in a single succinct volume like that. A lot of people talk about this stuff, like Greg Braden, but they really only have about 80% of the picture, and the part that they lack is the hyperdimensional aspect of reality, the fact that we are all connected at a higher level through a higher space to something above and beyond this existence. And
didn't you?
Kind of what,
sorry.
What's that?
You reminded me of something, and I got rude for a minute because I was thinking on that. But I was going to ask you, didn't you and Richard Hoagland already do a series of articles on Enterprise mission about hyperdimensional physics?
We did, but what had never been put together, and what I felt really compelled to put together, was the fact that this does connect to all of the things that people were very concerned about during that period, the 2012 era, the Hopi prophecies, all of the different kinds of experiences that people were having, and that we're still going through. We're still in this really dramatic shift in our society, our culture, to whatever the next thing is going to be. And I wanted to really comfort people about that and get them to understand that these were common cycles of shifts and changes, and that most of the time when we do have major dramatic changes in our monetary systems, our governments, they end up being positive and things end up getting better. So I was simply trying to get people to appreciate the fact that, we actually are going through this period of change, and it's all driven by physics. It's all backed up by scientific experimentation. And, you just have to be aware of it and be aware of the fact that you are, in fact, a willing participant in the outcome. And that's why the book was titled The Choice, because everybody has a choice about how they're going to approach the future. And I really wanted everyone to know about it. So hyperdimensional physics was one aspect of that overall message that I was trying to convey with that book.
Yeah, that was the hyperdimensional physics that drew me to Richard Hoagland's site. That and his article about the JFET, the moon that he thought might have looked a lot like a Death Star. He had a whole big interesting article on it.
Oh yeah, the moon with a view, I think he called it.
Yeah, that one.
It was about Iapetus. Yeah, Iapetus is a weird place.
Oh, is that how you pronounce it?
I believe it's Iapetus. Yeah. It's a moon of Saturn that's at about a 60-degree incline to the orbital plane, and it's actually a dodecahedron. It is not a sphere. It actually has, you can actually see on the horizon where it comes to a point, like a straight line to a point, and a straight line to a point, and a straight line to a point. And the thing is has all the markings of an artificial satellite. And, I thought Richard did a really great job with that article. And it really was an interesting thesis. It's one that I don't think has ever been expanded upon. But, the pictures don't lie. They tell you what's there. And it's not a normal looking astronomical body at all. It has, like I said, all the earmarks of something artificial.
Wow. I agree with you. The whole thing was very interesting. But while that is true, the very concept in your mind that in the ancient past there could have been a Death Star like the one on Star Wars is kind of a big major leap of faith.
Well, yeah, but I think he meant Death Star in terms of more like a Dyson sphere, more like a generation ship or ship that came from somewhere else a long time ago and kind of ended up parked in orbit around Saturn. It too could have been a base for extraterrestrials. So it's you look through the solar system and you see all kinds of evidence of some sort of previous presence. Now, whether that presence is proto-human, related to human, or whether it's truly extraterrestrial, or whether it's in fact alien, meaning not humanoid at all, not related to us, something completely separate line of genetics. Is a really open question. It's one that we're never going to answer until we get out of this space and start exploring. And we also have to really, be honest about what we find, which is my other big issue with the current agency that does space exploration, is I don't think they're very honest.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry I kind of drifted you away there. Those are a couple of things that were very interesting to me. Coming back to your books where we were at, though, you told us a little something about Dark Missions, I think it was, and The Choice. But now you got your other three, Ancient Aliens on the Moon, Ancient Aliens on Mars, and one we're talking about today.
Well, yeah, Ancient Aliens on the Moon is essentially a book where what I wanted to do is take a lot of the information about the possibility of there being extraterrestrial artifacts on the Moon, and what that means is structures, buildings, pyramids, plants, power plants, that kind of thing on the Moon, and take that information and put it into a really short, succinct book that was geared towards a younger audience, because we talked about that stuff in Dark Mission. But the fact is, Dark Mission is this really huge, thick, extremely technical book, and it's not, at 150, 200,000 words, I don't know what it is. It's really not very accessible. It's almost 600 pages now, and it's really hard to get through. It's really hard to get through unless you really have a lot of passion for the subject. So what I wanted to do is to get the Ancient Aliens audience to realize that, the search for ancient aliens shouldn't just include the planet Earth. We should also be looking at evidence off the planet Earth, for instance, on the moon. And, it goes over a lot of the stuff that's been historically looked at, transient lunar phenomenon, glass structures on the surface of the moon, and then new stuff that we found. There was a very controversial object called the Daedalus ziggurat, which looked like a Mesopotamian-style pyramid on the dark side of the moon.
That was interesting.
Yeah, and that was something that came out in the book, and there was a big controversy about that. And again, if you go to my blog, you can read some of the back and forth on that particular issue. And even last night on Jimmy Church's program on Fade to Black, I kind of continued to get into it with one of my critics on that one. So it's, it was one of those things where, I was hoping to sort of make a shorter, more direct presentation to the younger audience that's found out about all this stuff through the programs like Ancient Aliens. And then, logically, the next step in that would be to move to Mars and go to Ancient Aliens on Mars, because there's all kinds of stuff on Mars. And the first book really goes back through the history of looking for extraterrestrial artifacts and the possibility of a civilization. I mean, I deal with the Schiaparelli and Lowell and the canals. I deal with very, very early Tesla transmissions that he believed he received from Mars. Marconi believed he received transmissions from Mars. The U.S. Navy actually pointed in 1924 at Mars' closest approach. They actually pointed some radio telescopes, listening devices at the planet Mars, and they actually received a message which printed out on what was probably the first Xerox printer, basically, of its kind ever. And the image that came through was a humanoid, not human, but humanoid face, profile face, which was really very freaky. And we go from that to the Viking missions in 1976 and the Inca City, the so-called Inca City on Mars, the face on Mars, the controversy about Cydonia, and then look at some other aspects of Mars. And the reality was that, like I said earlier in the interview, there was just so much information, so many new discoveries about Mars when you start dealing with what the rovers have found on the surface, and you look at newer images of Cydonia, and you look at other areas of Mars that have been imaged now by various different spacecraft, and you begin to see evidence of an ancient ruined civilization all over the planet. And, I felt like all that stuff needed to be talked about. And even in the course of doing Ancient Aliens on Mars, too, I found completely new things that people have been finding in images. And it just really, it ends up painting a really, I think, complete picture of the fact that there is a lot of evidence of extraterrestrial ruins of an ancient civilization that inhabited this solar system a long, long time ago. And how far back is anybody's guess. It's pure speculation, but some of the stuff appears to be very, very old. So I think we're talking about civilizations going back perhaps millions of years that inhabited, Mars and the moon and other places besides Earth. The question that needs to be answered now is, who were they? What were they doing there? And how, if at all, did they affect human evolution? That's what I'm the most curious about.
I'm kind of curious if they could still be there in underground dwellings.
Well, I think there's some evidence for that. I mean, one of the things in Ancient Aliens on Mars 2 that I deal with is the infrared, thermal infrared images of Cydonia and what appears to be a vast complex, a city beneath what we suspect, what Richard and I suspect is a very thick ice sheet covering with very, very thin, dusty surface over the top of it. And so the thermal infrared camera was able to penetrate through the ground a little bit. And the data that we got back is so reflective, it's so intense that it almost implies that if there was machinery and civilization down there, that the lights are still on. It may be abandoned, but the lights are still on. So it actually it actually is something like a scenario out of the film Forbidden Planet, where you have there's not much left above ground on Mars. Well, there's actually plenty, but I mean, there's quite a bit left above ground, but what's underneath the surface is even more impressive. And that's one of the things that really came out in this book, and that I ended up spending a lot of space in the book on was that concept.
Well, you and Richard are still working together from time to time?
Well, not really. I mean, Richard kind of has gone his own way. We talked about doing a dark mission too, but we really couldn't agree on the direction for it. And the other thing is that I work very quickly. I work a lot quicker than he does. He's much more meticulous in his pacing with how he does his writing and stuff. And it just wasn't that compatible a situation.
It reminds me of my going out with my dad to work on cars or fix air conditioners or whatever he needed me to do. It just drove me crazy having to wait for him and work at his speed.
Yeah, exactly. So we just worked at different speeds, and I just decided that, I wanted to get these books out because I think there's a whole Ancient Aliens audience out there that doesn't know about any of this stuff. People that used to listen to the old Coast to Coast AM show with Art Bell and George Norrie and the older X-Files crowd, they know all about this stuff. But, their kids are just coming into this, and they don't know any of this data. So I thought, well, it's really important that we get some new stuff out there for the younger audience. And I wanted to do one book a year, and much shorter, much more concise than Dark Mission. And that's what I've ended up doing. And along the way, I've made some new discoveries that have really, really charged me up and got me interested again in what still might be found on Mars.
Well, I heard tell that NASA refused to go back to the moon anymore, but what they did, it's close enough for them to get to that they could actually, search Mars, not Mars, but the moon, and look for some of this evidence on the ground if they would be honest in sharing about it.
Well, yeah, and the problem with there are probes like the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and the problem with LRO data that I've looked at is that it appears to be whitewash. It does not look to me like it's showing anywhere near the detail that you got back in the 1960s. And there's this myth out there that newer is necessarily better. And although something may have a potentially better spatial resolution, if the lighting conditions are not right, if the camera is looking straight down on something as opposed to looking at it from an oblique angle, you're not going to be able to see a lot of the things that were evident in the Apollo photography. And the fact is that the Apollo photography, the film was incredibly good, the cameras were incredibly good, the lenses were 250 millimeter high quality lenses, the windows were optically perfect. So, the truth is that I place a lot more value and in the original database, the original photographic database, the old analog database, than I do in the new digital database, because what I find is whenever I'm interested in an area, there either isn't a good clear photograph of it, or if there is, it doesn't show anything remotely like what the Apollo camera captured, or the Lunar Orbiter camera captured, and that makes me highly suspicious that a lot of the stuff that's very interesting to us has just been whitewashed out. I mean, there's no way that some of these things that are seen are going to just be optical illusions. There's no way. And yet, when you get same area photographed by, let's say, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and you're looking straight down, what is obviously a completely chaotic ejecta blanket, let's say around the crater Copernicus, becomes this completely smooth, bland, gray landscape, and that just doesn't add up. So, again, because of that and many other experiences with NASA over the years, I don't trust them.
The smooth landscape would have been a red flag for me. I mean, you're talking about the moon where it's mostly iced over. It's not like it's grass. It might look smooth or level or whatever. You would expect something a lot different from a frozen ground, in other words.
Yeah, it really is. If you look at the LRO image maps of, let's say, the ejected blanket of Copernicus, what is clearly from the oblique images taken by Apollo or Lunar Orbiter or something like that, you can see all this chaotic terrain and all these really interesting features. And then when you look straight down from the MRO images, they're just completely blank and look like any other plain, boring real estate on the moon. They're just way too smooth. And that indicates to me that there are issues with it. Even the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, I mean, they're images of the face on Mars. If you look at the face on Mars, there's areas around what you would call the chin area, and then there's the sloping, the base, the base upon which the face seems to rest. And if you zoom up on that, you can see this odd meshed cross-hatching pattern. It's just barely faintly visible. And to me, that's completely artificial, and it's not part of the image process or the image scan. And, you kind of got to wonder what this is, but it's just not clear enough to really be able to make out details. I mean, you can supposedly make out a boulder as small as 3 feet across, yet somehow this pattern emerges, and that's just, you do a histogram on it, and there's just no data there. It's as if somebody took a tool and just kind of whitewashed over it a little bit. So, unfortunately, I think even if we have better cameras and better spacecraft, I don't feel like we can trust the database. And the same thing goes with the Clementine probe in 1994. It had a pretty good camera, but the high resolution camera, I've never actually seen a high resolution image from Clementine, and it's really weird. It's really weird that you look at the crater Tycho, which I'm interested in, and there's some very odd features there. And in Clementine, they have a medium resolution visual light camera, and then MRO scans the same area with its camera that's supposedly 10 or 100 times better, and the picture's not any better. The database, the data is exactly the same. It's the same quality. So it's as if they dumbed down the high resolution camera information so that it matches what already exists. And that's just, to me, that's not plausible.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen these pictures myself, but I do understand where you're coming from. Before you get out of here, though, well, we got 20 minutes, but I don't want to get wrapped up talking and overlook a chance for you to tell everybody what you got going on in the near future, in other words.
Well, in the near future, I shot a couple episodes of Hangar 1, which is going to be coming up in the fall. They're going to be showing season 2 of that show on History Channel on H2. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Did some great interviews for them. Still waiting to hear on Uncovering Aliens. And again, if you like the show, by all means, tweet the Science Channel and tweet Animal Planet, or send them an email and let them know that you'd like to see more episodes. So that may be happening. And beyond that, I've got a bunch of calls and conferences I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing some more television stuff here in the near future, and I'm also going to write another book for next year. Ancient Aliens and Secret Societies is going to come out next year. So
I have got to talk to you about that.
Yeah, so my plate is really full. My plate's really full, and then of course, any conferences. There's a few conferences that are out there. There'll be more stuff at the beginning of next year, I think, than in the fall, because I just got too much work to do. And I'm also doing. I have other things that I do. I have other skills, and I'm actually been hired to write a screenplay for somebody, and I'm working on that too. So lots of different stuff.
Have you by any chance ever been diagnosed ADD, if you don't mind me asking that question? The only reason I even asked that is because you're so busy, you've got so many irons, and yet you keep up with it. And to my way of thinking, only a hyperactive mind can do that.
Well, no, I have not, but I have thought that maybe Adderall might help me focus a little bit better, because I spend about 3 hours on one thing, and then I spend about 3 hours on another thing, and then of course there's constantly you got to update your website and my blog. Things happen that I need to comment on, and I'm doing radio programs, and no, it's just look, this is my passion. I mean, aliens, extraterrestrials, this stuff is my passion. Royce, and it's just, when it's your passion, it doesn't feel like work, so you just do it, and you just enjoy yourself. And I'm on a great ride right now. I'm having the thrill of a lifetime, really. I mean, there was one period in March, April, where I was on TV in prime time on one or two or three different networks every night of the week for 21 straight days. It's just like, wow, that's really cool. Not many people get to have an experience like that in life. So I just kind of do what I'm interested in doing, and love speaking at conferences, and I just like to do fun. I love every aspect of this thing that I'm doing, and it's a chance to talk to people and meet people and learn from them too, because there are so many bright, smart people out there that are ready to move forward. And,
that is true.
And I just say, look, write your own book. Just start going. Just write your own book. Do your own speaking thing. Create a conference yourself. Start putting something together. Start, hire speakers to come in and speak for you and speak at it yourself. And that's how you get going. It's one of these things where you have to commit to it.
Right. Well, that explains an awful lot. I had a thought just a minute ago. I'm kind of like you, Mike. I keep a lot of irons in the fire. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. Did I hear you correctly say Area 1 instead of Area 51?
No, I don't think I brought up Area 51 at all.
I thought you said something about TV show Area 1. They're going to be doing an HD too. Hangar 1. That's what I'm sorry.
If you don't know, it was a new show. It debuted last year. It was a show. Basically, the MUFON people are involved. It's produced by Go-Go Lucky Entertainment. It's a really, really, really high quality production company, and it's a show about famous MUFON cases where they talk about these different cases and the process of their investigation. And they're doing a season 2, and they asked me to be part of it. I knew one of the producers there from my Ancient Aliens days, and so that's a new show that I'm going to be on this fall. I didn't get a chance to do Ancient Aliens Season 7 because I was involved with uncovering aliens for another network, and I was contracted to them, and they were paying me more. So it was one of those things where
what they say about following the money.
So I missed Season 7 of Ancient Aliens, but I do believe there's going to be a Season 8. Somebody said there's a rumor floating around that Ancient Aliens has been canceled. There won't be a Season 8, but I don't believe that's true. I mean, it remains one of history's most successful. One of their most successful shows, and they moved it to H2 to try to drive up the numbers for H2, but H2 doesn't quite have the market penetration. There's a lot of things that go into these network TV decisions, and so I'm just trying to do as many different shows as I can.
Could be two TVs are a little expensive for a common market yet.
Well, H2 is history's second channel. It's their new number 2 channel that's been out for a couple of years. So they moved Ancient Aliens from H as a history channel to H2, and trying to get people to switch over to H2 and request it, on more cable networks. But so the ratings may have gone down, but as far as I know, Ancient Aliens is still going to go forward for Season 8.
Okay,
I hope
H2,
it's a great show.
By H2, then you don't mean high definition 2.
No. I mean the channel H2. There's history, and then there's history. It's history 2, basically, that they call it H2.
Okay, I got you. Now, see, when you said H2, my first thing I thought was high definition 2, like it was the next generation in high definition viewing. And
no. Well, that is out. That's isn't that called 4K or something like that? It's I don't know. There's a new standard out there of television that's really spectacular. They're all spectacular, but breathtaking, really. This new. I think it's 4K. I don't remember what they call it, but there's yet another new standard out there.
Okay. Well, before we run out of time, is there anything you'd like to mention that I haven't thought to help you cover or ask you?
Well, no, just that you can get any of my books through my website, mikebara.blogspot.com, or you can go to amazon.com, pick up Ancient Aliens on Mars 2 and Ancient Aliens on Mars. They kind of go together. They're a match set. Also, if you go to the Photos tab on my website and click where it says Picasa Web Album, there's a link there. If you click on that, it'll take you to a web album I've got set up where I've got all the pictures from Ancient Aliens on the Moon. I've got all the pictures from Ancient Aliens on Mars. I've got all the pictures from Ancient Aliens on Mars 2. I've got all the pictures from the Choice. So everything is on there, and that's just because the fact is that anything that you translate from computer to print, you're going to lose definition. It's just you're not going to see the detail and the structure that you would see on the computer. So I put everything up there in high resolution for people to take a look at, so you can see the pictures there. And I also wanted to mention passing of a friend this past week. There was a lady named Chris Lilly who did all the illustrations for me for the book The Choice. and a really sweet lady. She passed away from ovarian cancer this past week. Her husband Keith was a bass player in a local Seattle band that was kind of the soundtrack to my youth as I was doing a lot of dancing and clubbing. And I just wanted to mention her in passing. She won't be forgotten. She was a very, very sweet woman and a very talented artist. And I wanted to say, goodbye to Chris publicly and thank you for what you did for me. And I'm sure that where she is now, that things are much better and a lot more fun.
Well, I'm quite sure that can't be any worse than it is here. That's for sure.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I mean, with all that stuff going on with Ferguson and other things in the world, any other place is found to be better than all the violences in Earth right now. Yeah. There's unfortunately that seems to be part of the human condition. So my question for you at this point, have you ever thought about delving into ancient aliens and their connection to religion? Well, yes, I have. And as a matter of fact, the next book I'm going to be doing is Ancient Aliens and Secret Societies. And what I'm curious about in that book is, there seems to be, within NASA, there seems to be some sort of precognition or pre-knowledge that they were going to find something out there in space. I just have a feeling that they already knew that they were going to find artifacts on the moon and artifacts on Mars. And so then the question I began to ask, which we dealt with a little bit in Dark Mission, was how did this information get translated to them? How did it end up inside of NASA? And the answer is that there were three major secret societies that really dominated NASA, especially in the 1960s. You had the Freemasons, you had the Nazi faction, which was the German rocket scientists brought over, and then you had out at JPL, you had what we call the magicians, which was basically the followers of people like Aleister Crowley, who were into all kinds of black magic. And as I trace the history of these organizations back in time, what you find is they all come back to sort of the same root source belief system, which is a belief in these ancient gods of ancient Egypt, who, if you buy into the ancient alien theory, the ancient astronaut theory, as Eric von Daniken would describe it, you're talking about extraterrestrials. So somehow, some way, I believe the plan or the information that there would be ruins left behind on the moon and on Mars got to those guys inside of NASA. So what I'm going to examine in that book is exactly how that took place. Where did that information come from? And how was it kept over the centuries? And so we reached a point where technologically we could actually fly back into space and, take that one small step for man, but one giant leap for mankind, which I think is a reference to the Anunnaki and the previous, human civilizations from which we probably descended. So, that's the next thing I'm going to do, and I'm really fascinated in it. And I think even though I've got the book pretty well planned out at this point, I'm sure that just like with all of them, I'm going to discover things that I didn't know along the way. And I'm going to discover some incredible new stuff, and I can't really wait to get started on it. Yeah, there's a good chance you might. I've been studying that topic for some 25 years, either through TV documentaries, on the internet, books, various sources, and it's really involved. Yeah. Well, it can be. So you got to, what I'm going to try to do is narrow it down to more straight lines, to maybe 3 straight lines if I can find them. And that'll be a really interesting book to do. There's a lot of it passed through religions. I mean, I think that there are some people who still argue that the Knights Templar and the Freemasons are not associated with each other, but it's pretty obvious to me, I think, that when the Templars were wiped out by the Catholics in the 1300s, that they then went underground for a while and reemerged in public as the Freemasons. And I would suspect that they even started the Protestant movement as a way to sort of combat the Catholic Church. And you also had the Teutonic Knights who broke off and ended up, basically Hitler considered himself to be a Teutonic Knight, and Churchill and Roosevelt were Freemasons. So it's going to be really interesting to trace these paths through history and not get too caught up in the details. I mean, Graham Hancock has written some good books about this, but wow, he gets so I think sidetracked by the details, the little itty bitty details, and I'm going to try to avoid that. Kind of paint the bigger picture with the idea that the question is, did extraterrestrials
come down from somewhere else, land here on Earth, post-diluvial Earth, help us with the rebuilding of civilization, and then at some point leave us to our own devices and kind of wait for us to return to the stars. And I think that that's the grand journey that we're going to take. It's probably going to be a journey of 12,000 years or so. And, again, like I said, I don't know how it's going to come out or what it's going to say until I actually sit down to write it. But I can't wait to get started.
Well, I can't wait to let you get started because I want to get a chance to see it when it's done.
Okay.
I show that the music is going to interrupt us any minute now. Before it does, let me mention to everybody that not to go away when the break music comes on. I've got another guest coming on right behind Mike. Rob, was it Rob or Rod? I think it's Rob Skyba. I don't have it open in front of me. And he's going to be talking about ancient aliens in a way himself, so that might be of some interest to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll try to listen in, right?
Oh, do you know how to get to Revolution Radio?
No, not off the top of my head, no.
freedomslips.com. You click on the chat link up at the top of the page, and it takes you into the chat room. And once you're in there, it's the left player at the bottom of the page. There's 3 players down there if you want to listen in.
Okay, sounds great.
All righty. Well, with that, I expect them to interrupt me any time now. And tell them your website link real quick before they interrupt us.
Yeah, it's mikebara.blogspot.com. There's 1 R, or you can just type Mike Bara into Google, and it should be the first site that comes up. You can connect with me on Facebook. I've got a Facebook fan page because my personal page is filled up with 5,000 people as friends at the moment. You can connect with me on Twitter at MikeBara33. You can look me up on YouTube. I'm going to be posting some new YouTube stuff early next week, which is going to be my lecture from Contact in the Desert. And, that's how you get connected with me. And my books are all on Amazon.com.
All righty. Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate you coming today. And as you can hear, they're interrupting us now. So you guys, will see you back in a few minutes. And Mike, stay in touch.
Thank you, Royce. I will.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Hello, I'm Benjamin.
And I'm Jasmine.
We are inner tour guides with black belts in the art of self-awareness and how to live a passionate life.
We love talking with you about what you have and what you want.
More importantly, we want to explore with you how to bridge the gap between that wanting and bring it right back to the having.
So what are your hopes, dreams, and desires?
Is it money, love, success, health, wealth, or something even more specific?
Let us guide you through the exciting adventure of turning what you want into what you have.
Come join in the conversation on our show, The Inner Revolution.
We look forward to exploring with you.
The finder of lost children and missing persons. Monique Lassan. Surveillance civil and criminal investigations. I investigate.
I am the chosen one.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child.
Yes, every Wednesday evening on Revolution Radio, come join our very own Eye Investigatrix, Monique Lassan, with her private Eye X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children?
Private Eye X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in. But is your destiny to find the golden child?
Moscow's freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. The heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real.